This episode of the Jiu-Jitsu Times podcast is brought to you in part by No Judges Needed BJJ Apparel and Lavender Lane CBD products. You can use the promo code JJT for 20% off your first order at No Judges Needed, and the code JJTimes20, all uppercase. Last two items are numerical for 20% off your first order of CBD products. Thank you very much for sticking with us. Enjoy the show. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Jiu-Jitsu Times podcast. I am your host, Kevin Bradley, joined as always by my co-host, Mr. Kevin Gallagher. And today we are breaking down the incredible performances at last night's UFC 253. Israel Adesanya retaining his title. Jan Błachowicz becoming the new light heavyweight champ in the wake of John Jones moving up to heavyweight, defeating Dominic Reyes, and the new superstar made overnight, Brandon Royval, a man who's been putting in the work, but just that performance really just launched him into a different stratosphere for a lot of people. It was an incredible on-the-feet show, and that finished with a phenomenal guillotine choke secured not even a minute into the second round. Just like overall, what do you think of the card, Kev?
I mean, it was a great card. I'm not gonna lie, the first fight was boring me to tears. I was literally watching two guys. It was thinking about them on a main card and fighting their way to get up to a main card and putting on a display like that. It just seemed like neither one of them wanted to win the fight. But after that, it all got better again. I mean, the second fight with the two girls was a good fight. They the one girl that was an ex-Lloyd Irving black belt.
Yeah,
she this was her second event. She was on the last show that Bill was on, so this was her second event in 2 months, which you see Dana White doing a lot. I wonder if we can get back to that in a minute. I wonder if that has to do with the fact that there's just not as many bodies out there for COVID. But, she didn't take a lot of damage in her last fight. She came back out and fought again tonight against the girl from Brazil. And it was a nice fight, a really good fight. Those two chicks put it on the line, man. They really came to get it. And they just got better and better. Obviously the Reyes fight was a barn burner. And then the last three fights were amazing.
Yeah. Let's talk about Reyes real quick, because I was a guest on the Grappling Hour podcast. Shout out to Mr. Rafa Sparza for having me on and making fun of my camera setup the entire time. Beforehand, he did some polling of his fans on Instagram as to who was going to take this victory, and overwhelming favorite was Reyes coming in. I think after that performance against John Jones, the first man to really make John look human in his entire UFC career. We're thinking we're going to get that same level of competitor, but he looked a lot more hesitant this time around. What did you think?
Well, I mean, it's funny. I was watching the fight with Matt Arroyo last night, and we were talking about it, and I hadn't given much thought to what was his name, the Polish guy for the new light heavyweight champ, Jan.
Yeah,
right. I didn't give him much thought. I know he knocked out a few people in his past, but
he's coming off of a win against former champion Luke Rockhold.
Right, exactly. Level Luke Rockhold with that big left hand.
Yeah.
The idea is that power is a huge deterrent. When you have knockout power, we could talk about that again in the fight with Izzy and Costa. When you have that much power and you have that much knockout ability, it gets inside of your head and starts to alter your game plan. And then once you are altering your game plan, you're falling into line of the power puncher, because that's what they want. What Jan did so well, and what he does, so I mean, you could say he's only got one punch. I mean, but that left lead kick at the body, you saw the big welt on the body of Reyes throughout the fight, and he kind of paused.
Yeah, his side looked like he had an infection almost. Yeah, right. And but it was just blunt force, which is
when you're fighting from an unorthodox style, the whole game plan is to beat the lead foot. So if I'm standing, when you're standing right-handed, left-handed fighter, both lead feet are pointing to one another on the same side. So your goal is to start to beat that lead foot. So he's throwing all those strikes from the lead kick to the side. He liked to paw with the jab. All of those things are intent to move your opponent into your power hand. Conor McGregor does it really well. He throws spinning kicks. He throws lead kicks. He paws with the jab. All things that move your opponent into the power lane of your power punch. And Jan does it really, really well. He does it so well that it looks like he's not trying to do it. And, he looks like he's not. Looks like when you watch Jan fight, he looks boring. He looks flat-footed. He just looks like this boring little fighter that's plodding forward. But the whole time, he's very good at getting people to walk into that power lane. And once you walk into the power lane, that big left hand, it's lights out. It only takes one.
I think that going back to Reyes real quick, a lot of people were expecting, like in his fight against Jones, he was headhunting from the moment the bell rang. Like he was exploding in those early rounds, and maybe he lost it towards the end. Like this was his first time really being tested against that type of champion. And looking at that first round against this fight, he seemed a lot. I assumed that his hesitation was coming from, I know that I can get to those late rounds. I want to be reserved. I want to make sure I can explode later when I have to. But I felt like it might be something more than that. Like he almost seemed stalled when really confronted with the combinations.
When you watch a fight, I mean, you can game plan for fighting a power puncher all you want. You can game plan for fighting someone that has the skill set of Conor McGregor, has the skill set of Demetrius Johnson, all these other people that you can think about that fight, that have heavy hands, that like to stand up and all the other things they used to do. But the reality of it is you don't really understand what you're up against until you're in the cage against that person. Like, I don't care how many times you can game plan against someone with the same power, same left hand, the same abilities as Jan. It's not the same as Jan, because if it was, they would be fighting for the title. So when you get into the cage and you start to see a couple of Jan's, lead kicks, and you just see that straight left hand coming like a missile straight to your face with all the power of a jackhammer that he puts behind it, even though it's not connecting, the punches are coming and spurring your thoughts of, oh my God, this is horrible. This could come by and kill me. Even if it hits your hands, it punches you in the shoulder. And you saw Jan throwing that left hand incessantly, throwing it all day long, which got inside of Reyes' head, left him back on his back feet, left him not willing to exchange. And again, maybe part of it was he was hoping that Jan would get tired, but he didn't have a chance to, because he touched him and that was it.
I think that's a good point to ask you something I've wanted to ask you for a while, and that's that I think for a lot of the fights on this card, leg kicks really played a big role. They played a role in, I think, the first decision on the card, and subsequently in the championship round, Costa's leg was just getting beat up. As someone who found MMA from boxing, how hard was it to translate or to adapt to the kicks?
Man, It's a funny question you say that, because immediately I think about the first time I ever sparred MMA after being, I was a pretty good boxer. I got a pretty substantial boxing background. I sparred a lot against a lot of really good guys, Yeah. So I had that mindset, and I can remember in the early days of MMA, because there was still, in my time when I first started coming up, MMA was like the reason why I didn't really pursue MMA as much when I was really in the prime of my fighting career, was because MMA was always like, what is this shit? Like, this ain't boxing. This is cockfighting. Yeah. And even the idea of their striking in general hadn't really developed quite to that point. You still had guys that you're either an MMA, you're either a striker, you're a wrestler. So what you saw was a lot of like shitty variations of striking. And in particular, when I saw guys that would throw leg kicks, in my mind, I'm thinking, it's a fucking leg. You're kicking me in the leg. I was like, whatever, go ahead, kick me in the leg. I'm gonna come by and I'm gonna crush you. I got screw leg kicks until I started sparring, and then you get caught with a couple of them leg kicks. And I will tell you, man, like, it takes your game completely sideways. You screws your mobility up. First of all, it hurts. And that's the greatness of someone when you talk about a guy like Jon Jones. Jon Jones isn't necessarily the type of guy that's going to knock you out with every strike he throws, but every time you come close to him, he touches you, it hurts. He hits you with that pointy elbow. It hurts. He hits you with the knee, kicks you on top of the leg. He catches you with leg kicks. They hurt. They deter your strategic approach because it hurts now. When you come in to throw a combination, that hurts. So when you're boxing and you're a big boxer and you're used to putting that lead weight on the league leg, and you're using that as your big strategic, your big advantage with those power punches, when you're moving forward and you get caught with them leg kicks, it hurts. Eventually, it's going to screw up your mobility because you're not going to be able to move off it as much, but it hurts. And then you don't want to do it anymore because you remember in the back of your mind, the last time I came in, I got clipped with that leg kick. And then you forget about the leg kick. The guys come high like Izzy did with the question mark kicks.
I think whenever I see leg kicks being utilized incredibly well, I always go back to this Pat Barry interview I saw a while ago, former UFC fighter, Thug Rose Namajunas' husband and coach. He came from like a kickboxing, Muay Thai background. It's kickboxing. I'm not super Muay Thai. And he said in his first 3 fights, he won the fights with like only leg kicks. So he was like, within 3 fights, he said he threw like 8 kicks and everyone always just gave up. He's like, 3 fights, 8 kicks, more money than I've ever made in my entire life.
Well, there's a nerve that runs down the back of your hamstring, and I don't know what nerve it is, but there's a nerve that does that. And when they teach police officers to use their extendable, retractable telescope batons, they teach them. You put the baton over your shoulder and you swing down to aim for that hamstring on the back of your leg, because when you make contact with the hamstring, it's debilitating. Like there are guys that are good with leg kicks that will crack you in the back of that leg, and your whole body just shuts down. It's a marvel of modern biometrics or biomechanics.
The leg kicks just the first time I ever got like kicked in the leg, it wasn't even serious. I was pounding around with like a buddy of mine who's like a Muay Thai guy, and he's always like, I'm scared of you jiu-jitsu guys, and so I'm like, no, relax, I'll go easy on you. And then he like tapped my leg, and I'm like, I give up.
Doesn't take.
I didn't like that. I didn't like that at all.
Doesn't take much. Those guys, they kick heavy bags all day long, and then their shin bones get dense, and that bone, like it happens physiologically. The bones, when you can make contact, that's why guys can break through bricks. Their hands and the bone density increases in correspondence to the striking and the blunt force.
Okay, moving on from kicks, there was an incredible submission. This is a jiu-jitsu podcast, and we would be remiss if we did not comment on what I believe is the fight of the night and the submission of the night.
Definitely submission of the night.
The only one on the card, I believe, and that would be Brandon Royval's standing guillotine, or like jumping guillotine against Kai Kara France. Holy crap! Like for those who might not be aware, and I think you're a great person to talk to about this. He did 2 submissions that are notoriously difficult for MMA, specifically because of how sweaty you're getting. He attempted an omoplata in round 1, and then he guillotines. You see them a lot, but normally they're from the guard position, or there's a transition. He jumped into that guillotine, and he was able to reposition, even though there was starting to be some sweat buildup. How much more challenging is it to lock up submissions not just no-gi, but like on a shirtless opponent, like when you're already starting to get a sweat worked up?
Yeah, I mean, it's incredibly difficult. We had Royval Guillotine on the podcast one of the times when you were out. I interviewed him. We talked a lot about guillotines in MMA fights, and he says, I don't even tell my fight. I tell my fighters not to do guillotines, just pretend like they don't exist. And the reason being is because he's seen more fights lost and more rounds of MMA lost by guys going back to try to attempt to finish a guillotine than having people sweat out and not being able to get their hips underneath them close enough to be able to get the right torque on the submission, pop out, and then you lose the round because someone's now on top of you in a position where you could have continued dominating from your feet to win the round. Like, guillotines are tough. especially when you're dealing with that arm in guillotine, just because there's a lot more space. When you have just the head in there, you can kind of crimp down on the head and work from that position. But it's also harder to get to that with the big gloves on. You can't really get your grips in right with those big gloves on. They get a good torque for a non-arm in guillotine. But if it works, it works. He went for it. He went for it earlier in the end of the second round, I think it was. And he had a weird kind of arm across guillotine that he almost finished. But you could tell just by watching it that he is adamantly confident in his jiu-jitsu and doesn't care about hell or high water. He's going to finish. And guys that are good with guillotines, guys that are good with arm and guillotines, that's their thing. There's dudes out there that that's kind of their thing. And it looks to me that him finishing that guillotine is kind of thing. Dustin Poirier almost finished Khabib with a very similar guillotine when he was in a match with him. So
the most incredible thing about the submission for me was that France was in the process of slipping out, because his feet at this point on the body it's pretty low. You want to be a lot higher to finish that choke. You want to be really pinching your knees together. And he was able to disengage his legs and then reposition them higher up to really get the finish on the choke. That is where you see a lot of transitions happen, where people feel that there's room for them to move now.
Right.
And so I can try and escape this, but he was so quick with the readjustment that
he was in danger right now. He's starting to kind of get choked right now. He knows he's in trouble. And you got to remember too, not only is this just a dangerous submission, this is also a dangerous submission halfway through round 3. We were already tired, exasperating, fighting for your breath, and now you find yourself.
Oh, this was round 2. This was into round 2. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, but still the same scenario. You fought super hard. You're tired, and all of a sudden, oh no, I got caught in this submission. I have to figure out how to get out of with all the being on a big stage and all other things to kind of outside stimulus to get your heart rate up. But you can look at this guillotine. One of the aspects of an arming guillotine that make this very difficult to get out of, particularly when guys are good at arming guillotines, is the fact there's a couple things you look at. First of all, look at his shoulder up over the top of the back of his opponent's neck. So the biggest mistake that people make when they're going for guillotines is they try to sit back to pull through that guillotine. It's kind of the old school way. You grab the head and you sit back into it. In reality, you want to crimp down to put the pressure on the other side of the artery. So there's 2 ways to crimp an artery when you talk about cutting the blood flow off. You can grab the hose, you can squeeze the hose, right, which is going to be direct pressure, or you can crimp the hose like you're crimping a garden hose, like crimping the artery like you're crimping a garden hose to cut the blood flow off. So in order to get that, you can see the direct pressure with his bicep on the right side. He has to start to crimp the neck on the opposite side to get the blood flow off on the opposite side because it's an arm in. So as he's putting his elbow into his hip pocket, that crimp is already starting to happen. And then when he went down to the ground again, he put his legs up higher. When he put his legs up higher to get more torque on top, it allowed him to get more torque on that neck.
I think also it should be noted that he was able to maintain complete control.
Oh yeah,
even as he was falling, hitting the canvas is especially when holding on to a slippery opponent. A lot of things can just get lost in translation there, but he was completely on the neck. He knew he had it. He had faith that he had it. And the number of guillotines I've seen completed versus number of heads that have popped out, just based on how hard it is to really get that grip. I think about how much I rely on, I do mainly gi, and I think about all the friction that allows me, so when I'm doing guillotines, I'm having a really coarse fabric at every point that you can stick to people. You can even grab the belt, you can grab the back, you can grab other things. You're able to really just maintain control. And I have full range of motion with my hands. I can slip in easier. This is a choke that is, especially with how much more aware of jiu-jitsu and the ground game the fighters of MMA have had to become since the beginning, when you could get away with just not really engaging there. It's a tough choke.
Yeah. I would be willing to guarantee if you talk to his training partners, you talk to people that are aware of his game, that they would tell you straight out, yeah, that's kind of his funk. Because there are dudes out there that are guillotine guys. Matt Arroyo, my head instructor, is a guillotine guy. He's got one of the best guillotines in the world. And when you live and die by that guillotine, you learn how to execute it at the utmost, technical ability, partially because you realize that when you go for a guillotine, you are giving up the strategical advantage of having the top position in the same way when you sit back for a triangle. So, when you sit back, it's do or die. I have to finish this technique. So they got it dialed into the point where they realize it's worth that gamble.
Yeah, they're like, unlike a lot of other chokes where if you fail to get it, like an omoplata, if you fail to get that, it's normally because they rolled and you're up. Like you can go to side control. There's a lot of transitions. If you don't get it,
right?
Yeah, if you don't get the triangle from bottom, you can maybe transition to an arm bar or something else. Guillotine, if you just don't get it, then that means they're just now in your guard, and you got to go on. You got to go do something completely different. Because now they're going to try.
Or if they're good enough, they pass your guard while you have the guillotine, which is what you see even more, I think, than guys.
Oh yeah, like kill the leg, hop over to the.
Right, they're quick enough to recognize you're sitting back and beat that opposite side leg and start to turn the corner and then go to the side.
Yeah, he actually. What's funny is that by the end of this choke, he had locked in a body triangle to secure it, which
we talked about this when we were watching the fight. I think he's 5'9" at 125 pounds. That's just a ridiculously athletic specimen for that weight class. So he's used to being that longer, lengthier, kind of more agile type fighter. So the ability to be able to wrap a body triangle up against a guy that's another dude that's also 125 pounds. That's all things in his wheelhouse of specialties he can work on.
What other fights do you think there are for Brandon after this at 125 because
man,
this got everyone's attention, so he's got a lot of asking
125 I don't know. I watched the fight. I still think that his stand-up needs a little work. He didn't look very sharp with his punches didn't look very crisp. I know he was winning some of the exchanges, but I don't know that his opponent was really is on the same par with him. I think he was just kind of maybe a little bit outclassed in general. That being said, 125 isn't really that deep of a talent pool. That's the reason why 125 fighters, we always tell people you want to get to the UFC, be a heavyweight, be a girl, be 125 pounds, because that's the easiest route to get there. It's just facts. I'm not trying to belittle them or say anything less about them. It's just that there's not as many 125-pound men running around to be able to go compete at that weight class. You've got Benavidez, you've got the current champ. I forget his name, the guy who just beat Benavidez. But at 125, there's not a whole ton of options out there for him to go up. But I'm sure they'll find him some top tier fighters. I'm sure they'll find him some ranked guys to go out there and go after him. Maybe we'll get Hudo back.
Oh man, that would I don't know. He's got a good guillotine. I don't know if it's good enough.
No. But he's earned the right to get paid, is the point. He went out there and put on a performance at the highest levels on a main event card. Not even the opening fight of a minicamp, like the second fight of a pay-per-view main event card. So he is definitely earned the right to go out there and get paid big money for his next event with a big top tier opponent.
Well, I think that would be a good point to go back and start talking a little bit more about Jan and Dominic, their co-main event. Incredible performance from Jan. I think he barely looked damaged by the end of the fight. I think his nose was a little wonkety wonk, but it already was kind of. And there was a moment on the show last night where I think it was Adam, the other guy that was another podcast host, by the way. Go check him out. I'll link him down below. But he mentioned no one's going to say that was a late stoppage, right?
No way.
Right? Because
a lot of people, when we watched it, one of the guys I was sitting with said before we watched had the benefit of the replay that it was a bit of an early stoppage. And in my mind, I was thinking it could have been. But when you watch, that stoppage is a classic example of an accumulation of damage leading up to the immediate, we have to stop this thing right now. His nose was plastered on the side of his face, and he took an accumulation of pretty severe, heavy blows leading to the knockdown, then took the couple solid with Jan standing right over the top of him. These are big, powerful guys. I mean, these guys are weighing 225, 230 on fight night. So.
Jan looks like a heavyweight.
Yeah, he does.
He looks like the way he moves, it looks like he's just like a tank. Jan Błachowicz sounds like the joke name you give to the biggest tank that you have in the military.
Just like, some super tough Eastern European guy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He grew up eating mom's goulash. And
Jan Błachowicz is the name of the tank that rolled over the Berlin Wall. Like I'm convinced that's no, but he looked so smooth. But the big question that we were talking about is what's next for light heavyweights? You know, like what does he do now? You know,
I mean, they have to. That's not on Jan's plate. That's on.
Oh yeah, I'm not
plate.
Like he looked incredible, and
there's
good on
talent.
him.
There's talent out there. I see a world where maybe Costa moves up to light heavyweight. I could see that happening in the future. I'm sure that cut down for him to get to what is he, welterweight or what is it? Yeah, welterweight is a tough cut for him. I feel like that's something that we could talk about in the future to see him maybe move up to light heavyweight. But as far maybe Izzy popping his head up to light heavyweight eventually, I don't see anyone.
It was middleweight.
Yeah, middleweight, exactly. I'm
sorry.
fried today. I can't see anyone in the middleweight division that could give Izzy a challenge. There's nobody out there. Maybe that Russian dude that just knocked out his buddy.
That was a thing that I thought was also no, I don't.
Right.
I maybe, but Israel is he's kind of just he's the guy.
Yeah,
you know, he's the guy for right now, and that means it's going to be tough to imagine anyone giving him a real shot in his own weight class. Yeah. I think no one, like, this is not the popular thing to say, but the biggest fight that was being made before Jones moved up to heavyweight and vacated was trying to see if we can make a double champ somewhere, like Israel going up to him, Jones going down to meet him. Like that fight, there was a lot of really solid back and forth between the two. If Israel just decapitates Jones, that means he immediately becomes my favorite fighter in the history of forever. And I think that's like, you know, undefeated MMA fighter who's currently just lighting the world on fire next to the GOAT, you know, like the Anderson Silva GSP match we never got.
Right.
I think that match, maybe like before he moves up, he has one last fight at light heavy, not for a title or for the title. No, not for the title. It's just him and Israel doing it because, you know, let's just have a fight. Let's make a new BMF belt and give it to them. You know,
yeah, you know, there's still some solid names out there. You got Johnny Walker out there still. I mean, there's guys out there that are still viable. You know, Thiago Santos, Glover still around. I mean, there's guys out there that are still legitimate athletes to come after that light heavyweight spot.
Well, I was also thinking because John isn't in that position anymore, maybe we make Jan and Israel happen.
Yeah, that's a possibility, but Jan's gonna have to fight a few more fights, I think, before they get that fight to Izzy. I don't know. I don't know. In today's climate, believe me, I'm sure that Dana White is looking to crown another superstar to hitch his wagon to, and Izzy after his dominant performance against Costa is definitely, you know, ripe for that, you know, double title belt, double weight class belt, double champ. Exactly.
I think we've kind of moved out of that super fight era. Like, I think having Connor and Amanda and DC, it sort of was like, okay, we're done for right now. Like, we don't need for there to be a billion champs.
Yeah, I don't. It's cool. It's not that big of a deal. I like that, but I still want to see guys. I don't know. I guess Mayweather did it too. They just move up the ranks. They fight heavier fights. Why do you go back down to the lower weight class now? You're already up there. You just put that belt. You hold on to it. But the problem is just because you move Izzy up to to light heavyweight. Now you've got a gap at welterweight. Now who's going to be the welterweight champion? You follow him talking about that whole train of thought.
Everyone moves up one. There's always going to be a gap that needs to be filled. I get that because
Right,
no one defend, like very few actually defend both.
Right. And
I think the only one actively doing that is like Amanda.
So now you're in a situation similar to you had when right now with Khabib, because Khabib can't fight, or say Conor when Conor was a double champ, right? So now you have
just holding up the division,
right? He's just holding up the division. So you have an interim champion, or even if that interim champion becomes champion, Conor could still tweet, "You're not really the champ because you didn't beat me," type shit. You know what I'm saying? So it leaves holes, and it takes away from someone else's ability to really say, "Yeah, I'm a viable champ." So you're losing the opportunity for another person to be a superstar. Like the UFC cares too much about building these superstars. I would rather them see them just be cool with the fact that this is the champ. He's the guy. We're going to allow him to have his due.
All right. I think that's a good point to transition to the main event.
Yes. Because a great fight.
Israel Adesanya, Paulo Costa. What a performance from Israel. Paulo looked good, but Israel just looked like outclassed him in every single regard, and we're witnessing one of the greats. We're witnessing the legacy being built for one of those guys that's going to be up there with Anderson, is going to be up there with GSP, with Jones, with fucking Matt Hughes, like Fedor. Just like those true greats. That is what I believe.
He still has to beat someone on
who's
that
left.
Tier. Yeah, that's the problem. Yeah, but the problem again with Izzy is that he doesn't really have his Frazier. He doesn't have his Joe Frazier. Like when I say that, it's like I'm Muhammad Ali. There's not really that. I guess you could argue that Costa could have been, but there's not really that overwhelming presence in the division that says this is the guy that really pushes and challenges. There's nobody out there that challenges Izzy.
Well, I mean, I think in terms of pedigree, his win over Yoel, as boring as the fight was for a lot of people, that has to mean something.
Right.
The Yoel has just been a terror for so long.
Yeah.
He beat Anderson Silva, granted Anderson's at the tail end of his
but you
career.
could also argue that both of those guys are at the end of their career. It's difficult not to at least bring that into the picture. He has to have, well, I mean, I guess, he had that amazing fight with Gasman, which I just finally watched a couple weeks ago. And
oh my
God, it was literally probably one of the greatest combat athletic fights I've ever seen, boxing included. It was amazing what a great fight that was. And he torched him, torched Calvin Gastelum, who's one of the toughest guys on the face of the planet.
What about Whitaker as well?
I guess maybe I stand corrected. It's just I don't know. Maybe if there's something about Izzy that doesn't catch the emotional eye of a John Jones or like the same way John Jones or Khabib or Conor has, or even Henry Cejudo for that matter. I don't understand why. I don't realize. I don't get it. But there's something about it. There's still people out there that really say that Izzy is not that good, that Costa took the night off. Costa had a bad night. Costa wasn't really trying hard. Like I saw something on Facebook today that said the fix is in. Dana White got inside of Costa's head to make him not fight as hard. Yeah, so they could push Izzy. It's crazy to me. Izzy's just that good, man.
I think what it is for a lot of people is that, and I say this as a fan in every regard of Israel Adesanya, he is one of the first generations, I believe, of a new type of fighter, in that their personality, the way they market themselves, it's very different than what we've seen from a lot of people before.
Yeah.
He's very much into like changing his look. He's very much into dressing the way he likes, which is a little bit out there sometimes. He likes talking about like cartoons and anime and these things that don't really fit in the mold of an MMA fighter. I think that contributes, that rubs a lot of people the wrong way. And I think we're all trying to understand him. We're trying to get a read on who he is and even the way he conducts himself in trash talk is
Right.
sort of like more reserved and sort of like.
I'll tell you an interesting fight that I would want to see just because of the implications involved around it would be maybe Kobe Covington and Izzy. I don't think they'll make that happen because I think Covington has to beat Usman first. I think Usman
Covington would get starched by Izzy, and I
He
say that
he would
knowing
be,
I
but
respect his talent as a
but
grappler.
his wrestling could be an issue for Izzy. And I remember Calvin Guy. He's a little bit bigger. I don't know that he'd be able to. That would be an advantage for him and all. But Kelvin Gastelum's a fucking badass wrestler. He couldn't take Izzy down. He couldn't hold him down.
Yeah.
We'll
and Kelvin doesn't really like he's a pretty natural fighter at that way. Like he's not depleted. He's coming in with a lot of his strength.
Right.
It's an interesting idea. It's very interesting. I don't know. Like who's the best wrestler that Israel's fought? Is it Gastelum?
Well, Yoel, but Yoel isn't a wrestler anymore.
Exactly.
Yoel, he doesn't fight like a wrestler anymore. He fights like a stand-up guy that's 41 years old that doesn't have the energy to be able to wrestle anymore. Gastelum probably, just because if he wants to wrestle, he can take anybody down. But even Gastelum right now, he's not wrestling first. Covington is striking, but he's also okay with bringing that thing in the ground and driving through to finish takedowns off of his strikes. It's part of his game plan. Usman and Izzy would be another good fight, I think, if Usman continues to go on this run as the dominant force he is. Why not have Usman and Izzy fight at middleweight? Usman is arguably an oversized welterweight. And Izzy, I think you could also say, point directions that maybe he's a bit undersized for a middleweight. He just doesn't look big. He's a little bit taller, but he doesn't look that big, stout, body and frame like you would consider like Costa, for example.
I think I would love to see Izzy paired with that type of cerebral striker, like as close as we can get to a prime Anderson, because prime Anderson Izzy is a fight that I loved their fight,
right.
Like there was still some Matrix stuff.
Even when you're looking at the dilapidated, depleted Anderson, Silva, they would still it was still a hell of a fight. I watched a little bit of that the other day on Instagram and thought about some of the cool, like just the great striking, magistry and magic that both of those guys are putting out there.
That's the thing is when you're that dominant in your own division, you start to look outside, and right. Jan's problem is that a lot of people haven't made their notoriety at the point where it's like we like the storyline of it, because we love to think that we're all about just like the pure matchups. And for a lot of the time, that's true. But we're also interested in the personalities meeting, and learning more about people.
Yeah.
Like that was what made that was one of the things that made GSP Diaz so interesting. Right. Was because you're getting the polar opposites of humanity. I like you. You're a good guy. Fuck you, Jordan.
Which is also why Kobe Covington Izzy is, and I don't like the fact that is a marketable fight. But hey, man, Dana White is PT Barnum. He could market the hell out of that. I mean, they might be rioting in the street afterwards, but it'd be a hell of a lead up to a fight.
Even though he didn't fight on the card and he just came off of a big loss. What do you think is next for Woodley?
Woodley?
Yeah, because I like
retirement. Retirement, I hope.
Yeah,
to be perfectly honest with you, I'm sure he won't. He'll try to linger around to make his stake, but I think his days of being a legitimate headliner fighter are way far behind him. He was starching everybody. I mean, he had such a huge run for a while. And then just when he lost to Usman, it just all kind of went away. Like he just doesn't look like he wants to be there. He doesn't look like he wants to be in a cage. Doesn't look like he cares about it anymore. And the sad reality of it is he might not even realize that is the case. He doesn't, in his brain, the warrior versus the heart, the warrior heart inside of him makes him think he can still go out there and do it, but in reality his brain is like, are you out of your fucking mind? What are you doing this shit for? This is ridiculous. And he doesn't want to look weak. He doesn't want to look like he's ready to give up. The sad part is it would make me sad to see Tyron Woodley, on a second tier, co-main event on a fight night, the same way you see
like BJ Penn.
Yeah, it's not worth it. I mean, I guess he's still making money. It's hard to say that. Well, he's still going to make $100 grand. 100 grand is 100 grand. But I don't think he's a viable fighter anymore. I think he could turn that page if he puts his mind straight. I don't think he's past his prime. I think he can go out there and make it done. But once a fighter kind of shuts it off, like they're just not in it anymore. Now, when you're in it for a payday and that's all you care about, you're not really in it to win it anymore. You're in it just to go get paid and do your thing and go home.
Do you think it's the same? Are you as concerned? I don't know if you saw any of the prelims, but the main event of the prelims had Diego Sanchez.
Yeah. Well,
and he was looking like something.
I will say this though. I watched that fight and I don't think that Diego Sanchez was completely outclassed in the way that BJ Penn was. And the guy he fought was good. The guy he fought was really, really top tier.
You see, I think that speaks more to this guy having a bad night than Diego still having. That's probably mean.
That could have been. But I mean, I watched Diego Sanchez and his approach, his strategy, his ability to land punches. Like you could say the kid was having a bad night, but Diego was also making him have a bad night, just being quicker to the punch and using his little quirky little moves and the way he always has. He's a very unconventional fighter. His boxing and his striking he throws punches from awkward angles that guys just don't really recognize as he coming. And it still appeared to me he was making it work. Not to mention his submission game is on point. A lot of people forget.
He was attacking some submissions, yeah.
He is really, really a world-class grappler. He went against Marcelo Garcia in the ADCCs and gave Marcelo fits. So, like, his grappling is on point and on top of the world. So, you keep all in line. Dude, I still don't think that fight was – now, I don't think that fight was completely one-sided and uncompetitive. That's my thought process from a strictly professional idea. Now the emotional part of me would like to say, Diego, please, like I'm begging you from everything I hold holy, you do not need to take any more damage, brother. Like you're good. We love you. We don't want to see the bad darkness that could be the result of too many more blows to the head that could end up with you turning into Mayhem Miller or some of the other cautionary tales we've seen popping up.
That it's sad that it has to go to that dark place when this conversation comes up, but that's where it has to go.
It does. Does. That's the reality of what we do, Kev. And trust me, I struggle with it all the time when I see young fighters come in the gym. Like I am training you possibly to commit to something that could be your eventual undoing, but you're going to do it anyway. I can look at you in the eye and tell you some things to maybe help you protect yourself better. But at the end of the day, you're going to go out there and jump into it. So I feel obligated to at least give you the best course of action to be able to be successful with that and teach you how to do it right. But man, fighters get hurt. That's all there is to it. That's the game.
And I think that's a good this is becoming a tagline of mine. That's a good place to do this. But as someone that's had a lot of guys come through your gym, like you and Matt, you've seen a lot of guys come in, say, I'm going to make this happen. I'm going to make it work. And maybe it doesn't work out. Maybe they have a few fights. When do you call it quits? Is it when you start to notice that you're losing your facilities and you don't have a lot in the bank account by now? Is it when you just clearly don't have the talent for it? Or
yeah, it's a difficult conversation to have. I've had it with a few fighters in my time. It's the time when you sit someone down and you say, look, here's the reality of what we're talking about here. You've just lost 3 of your last 4 fights. You're 7-4 or some shit like that. You know what I'm talking about? Like the reality of you making it to the UFC is going to be another 3 or 4 year journey. It's 3 or 4 years of hard struggle and to try to put 5 wins in a row, 6 wins in a row, because that's what it takes to get to the UFC anymore. You don't just get to be a 7-4 ho-hummer and make it to the UFC anymore. You got to be special. That's the talent pool. So when you look at these guys and you say to them, look, here's the deal. Like are you really, I don't believe that the next 5 years of your life will benefit you to continue to go on and make it to the UFC. Now, you could make it. There's a definite 100% possibility that you could turn it around and get it done. I know you have the talent, I know you have the heart, I know you have the desire, but the reality of it is you might not just be able to make it, and that's fine, because the ability to make it to the UFC is so fucking infinitesimal anymore. And it's not bad to say I gave it my all and just decided that I couldn't do anymore. Like, go to college, do something else. You don't want to be 40 years old and have nothing else to fall back on, man.
Even as someone that loves this sport so much that I can't, as a human being, I can't ignore the toll it can take, and I think having those conversations and being open about them, a lot of people got mad at like Joe Rogan for having a very public thing with Brendan Schaub saying like, you got to quit. And you could argue that he was a dick for doing it to millions of fans
on
online.
live on air.
Yeah,
right.
Like dick move. But that does not mean that conversation was not necessary.
No, it didn't come from a place of concern, because I'll tell you, man, fighters, like I said, there's the fighter's brain, mindset, and there's the fighter heart. And you just can't tell someone that dedicated so much time of their life to get a goal that is nearly unattainable that, hey, unfortunately, you tried. Now it's time to put that away and move on with your life. Like, what do you have? You've dedicated everything in your life to get to that point, and unfortunately, it just wasn't enough. You weren't special enough of an athlete. It doesn't mean you're soft. It doesn't mean you didn't try. It doesn't mean that like you weren't there. Sometimes you just didn't get lucky. Sometimes you had an opponent pull out at the last minute when you could have fought, and you took 3 months off, 3 years off because of that, or a year off because of that, because you couldn't get another opponent. Sometimes the cards just weren't in your favor. But reality is reality, man. You don't need to be fighting in a club for $500 a fight when you're 35 years old and expected to make it to the UFC. It's just not worth it for you anymore. It's not worth the toll you're putting on your body.
Yeah,
let's talk a little bit about Reyes before we get guy. We still haven't talked about the Reyes fight, or not the Reyes fight.
Reyes in particular.
Izzy Costa fight. I want to talk about the Izzy.
Oh yeah, okay. So Izzy, I mean, compare his performance now to his last performance against Romero. Just it's almost like he got so sick of people giving him crap about it that he's like, all right, fine. I'm going to show you guys that I can be an absolute Terminator. Right. And this guy's been talking shit, and I'm just going to absolutely make him look like just a regular guy. Like, I think looking at them, the eye test, you look at Israel, that's a tall dude, like looks strong, like athlete. You look at Costa, Greek god. Right. Like there is like the confidence he exudes from every pore is just next level, and he's just upfront about it. He's like very in your face with it, whereas Israel is like sort of just cool with letting it sit in his gut a little bit and like letting people do their thing. Costa, like the PR campaign he waged, including his whole tie of black. He was wearing his black belt. He threw a white belt at Izzy. Like it's just
Costa fought the fight he fought, and he didn't really fight the fight he should have fought. And you can say that he did it out of fear. You can say he did it out of strategy, but either way, he allowed Izzy to get the upper hand, and he paid for it in the end. It's the classic example of if my best me needs to be better than your best you. You've got two undisputed fighters that need to go out there and put it on the line and find out who the best is. Izzy fought the fight that makes him the best of what he is. Costa didn't do that. If you watch any of Costa fights before, he's a murderer. He comes forward. He fights hard. He throws punches. He throws combinations. He's doing what he can do to be overpowering and win the confrontation. And I think when he tried to pursue the fight a little bit more, he would have had more dividends, but he kind of took his foot off the gas. Now, the reason why he didn't fight that fight is because in the back of his mind, he's thinking about Robert Whittaker getting knocked out as he's coming forward, because that's what Izzy does. Izzy gets you to overcommit. Then he counters and falls back and hits you with those powerful counter punches, just the same way he's knocked out Costa with the same exact punch he knocked out Whittaker with. So it was a little bit different strategic approach for both fighters. it caused Izzy to really show his greatness because he had to deal with a fighter that wasn't going to overcommit to him. So he actually had to go out and be the aggressor. He started it just by touching him with them leg kicks. Just being able to touch him with them leg kicks was enough to be like, okay, cool. I'm touching him. I'm doing a little bit of damage. I'm starting to break him down a little bit. I know he's
his lead leg. His lead leg, I think it was Adam yesterday. He was like, it looked like he had gotten those suction cup things on it. But I'm like, no, that's just shots placed very specifically by a guy who could kick a tree down if you give him an hour.
Yeah, I watching Izzy fight this fight, I think it was a really good indication of really how good he was because it took him a second to figure out how to break down Costa mentally to get inside and start really being able to touch him with the power shots. It took him about a round and a half to get there. And then right in the middle of the second round, you could really see Costa starting to break and the punches starting to land. And then Costa eventually saying, well, I just can't sit here and get my ass kicked because I'm getting rocked. I got to come forward. And when he came forward, Izzy does what Izzy does. And he knocked him out with that lean back kind of creepy matrix hook he throws.
You know, I was actually expecting, I know this is not the first black belt that Izzy has fought, Robert, very accomplished jiu-jitsu black belt. Costa's a black belt. That was part of his like trash talk before the fight. I was expecting a little bit more jiu-jitsu, maybe more takedown defense, like attempts, even though Izzy's very good with takedown defense. But trying to bring the fight to the ground a little bit, maybe go up against the cage for a trip, instead of making it. You don't want to. No one wants to try and outstrike Israel Adesanya. I think you just aren't gonna. I don't know how many more fights he needs to end like this in order to prove that.
I really think, and I don't know where this comes from. In particular in this fight, and we've talked about this already before in the Cormier fight, the act of winning a takedown is extremely
it's taxing
on the body. And now you have a 5-round fight. If you blow yourself out trying to finish a takedown in the first round, now you got to go through 4 fights. You might have won that round, but you got to get 4 more rounds now against the killer. That's part of the problem. But I don't know what it is, and I don't really understand why. But I really feel like that fighters nowadays, even wrestlers, want to be strikers because either it's more exciting or maybe it's just easier to win a fight by knocking somebody out. I don't understand why it is that way. I don't understand what has happened. If you look at guys very rarely, with the exception of like Khabib and maybe Bryce Mitchell, a couple other guys out there that are truly, truly ground and pound dudes, you don't see the element of takedowns being incorporated as much anymore. Guys are super content with standing and striking and picking people apart. It seems to me that like MMA is almost becoming
kickboxing.
Striking is almost becoming kickboxing. And every once in a while, hey, we can clinch somebody, take him to the ground. I just don't see guys really utilizing that aspect of MMA as much anymore. And it kind of perplexes me. Because like you said, you've got a guy.
One eagle-shaped exception,
right?
Obviously.
Of course, no, exactly. And if you think about pound for pound, who is one of the greatest fighters in the UFC, everybody talks about John Jones right now, but I think John Jones is number 2, number 3 at this point, to tell you the truth, to be perfectly honest with you. After as you look at what happened to Reyes after he got knocked out, John Jones even talked shit about Reyes. I was like, well, that fucker almost kicked your ass, so you probably shouldn't be talking shit about Reyes anymore.
MMA math is sketchy because fighters can be different. They can come into different fights with different energies, but like, I want to see Jan Jones. Like, are you kidding me? Like,
hell yeah, everybody wants to see that, but we'll see what happens with Johnny. He who knows what's going on with that wackadoodle. I don't think he's the fighter he used to be. I'll say it here, and I'll keep saying it. I think you look at his last 2 fights, he almost lost. I don't think he's the same guy anymore. And I think that Jan hits so hard. It's a different fight against John Jones because John isn't going to let him walk him down the same way Reyes does. Because
I think John remembers he's a purple belt in that instance and goes for the takedown.
Oh yeah, that's the other idea. John Jones is a purple belt, but I mean his ground and pound is coral belt level.
Yeah,
like, he can call how you see it. But back to Izzy Costa, people that want to talk shit about Izzy are just dumb. I don't know how you could look at that fight and say that Costa threw it. Costa wasn't himself. Costa wasn't himself because Izzy made him not fight the fight he wanted to fight. And not just because of strikes involved, but because of being Izzy. Costa didn't want to come forward because he didn't want to get knocked out. So therefore, he wasn't fighting the fight he's supposed to fight. And Izzy picked him apart, found the range, and knocked him out.
I think I'm interested to see where Costa rebuilds after this, like how he rebuilds, because I think that guy's a champion level competitor. Look at his Romero fight. That's like a Hall of Fame fight for me. Like I thought, like it is the closest I've seen to Rock'em Sock'em Robots since I started really like looking at MMA. It was just like those two were just so busted up, and you didn't know who won. I think that's like one of the closest fights I've ever seen.
Yeah, I would consider maybe sending Costa up to light heavyweight. I'm trying to look and see how tall he is.
He's not taller than Izzy.
Yeah, he's not that tall, which would be his only deterrent.
Also, Cormier famously short for.
Yeah, but I don't think Costa's Cormier. I don't think Paulo Costa is Daniel Cormier. I'll say it here first. Yeah, he's 6 foot tall. Freaking Jan is like 6'5", I think it is. You know what I mean? Like John Jones.
Reyes
light heavyweight.
Too, yeah.
Light heavyweights are big guys. So that's kind of a problem for Costa. But man, he's still going to be able to fight.
Well, Jan's actually only 6'2", so that's not.
Oh, I thought he was a little bit taller than that, but that's fine. Yeah,
I think Reyes is a little taller.
Reyes was a monster. Reyes is the one that's 6'5".
He's 6'4". He's 6'4", yeah.
But who knows what happens with Izzy? Izzy could go up to light heavyweight. Izzy could go down to fight at welterweight against
Izzy could be Izzy
can do whatever he wants to do, and Costa is still going to get paid because Costa is an exciting fighter, with the exception of his fight last night that Izzy made him look bad, but Izzy makes everybody look bad.
Yeah, well, I think overall incredible night of fights. I think that it was started slow, it picked up by the third, and absolutely went away with it after that.
It was a good card. Lots of good cards. The first fight got a little bit boring, then they progressively got better as the night went on. Lots of fun to watch.
One of the guys in the first fight sees this, and they're just like, "Hey, man, we'll send location."
You know what? I'm a journalist, baby. I'm not a fighter. You should take my heeds as a cautionary tale and get your shit together, because you're not getting another main event fighting like that. That's just facts.
Oh man! All right. Well, I think I'm about ready to call it.
Just a little short. Just a little short. We're in 30 minutes, right?
It's never. We say that, but it's never. Hey, look. Hey, when you got a lot to talk about, you let it run away with it. But this is some good little nuggets in this one.
Yeah.
So I would love to thank all the loyal fans that we've gathered and accrued over the course of this podcast. Thank you so much for your continued patronage. You make us feel really important every time we see more and more of you watch us talk about stuff. But in the meantime, we've got a lot of really cool guests lined up for this week. We got Chewy coming on.
Oh, Chewy, yeah, Chewy's coming Tuesday.
Yeah, and we got a few others that we're working on down the pipe.
Maybe an editor meeting with Avery. Avery Clements, editor-in-chief.
That is the GOAT interview, no matter how many times we do it. But until next time, I have been your host, Kevin Bradley, joined as always by my co-host, Mr. Kevin Gallagher. Stay safe, stay healthy. Remember to love your loved ones, and be safe out there. It's scary. Good night.